In men, benign prostatic enlargement due to BPH, carcinoma of the prostate, urethral stricture, or prostatic abscesses. In women, pelvic prolapse, urethral stricture, urethral diverticulum, post-surgery for stress incontinence, or pelvic masses. So these are the few causes in case of men, and in case of males or females. Most common cause in males is BPH, and the rest of the causes like urethral stricture, prostatic abscesses, or carcinoma of prostate, they are usually uncommon causes of acute urinary retention. Whereas in elderly females, usually pelvic prolapse like cystocele, rectocele, these are the most common causes of acute urinary retention in females. Urethral stricture, urethral diverticulum, or post-surgery for stress incontinence or pelvic masses. In case of both sexes, if we talk about acute urinary retention, the causes can be hematuria leading to clot retention, certain drugs cause urinary retention. Severe pelvic pain may cause retention of urine, whereas sacral nerve compression or damage, cauda equina syndrome or cauda equina compression can lead to the acute urinary retention. And radical pelvic surgeries, pelvic fractures rupturing, causing the rupture of the urethra, neuropathic, neurotropic viruses involving the sensory dorsal root ganglia of the S2 to S4, multiple sclerosis, transverse mellitus, diabetic cystopathy, damage to dorsal columns of spinal cord causing loss of bladder sensation. So hematuria leading to clot retention, drugs, pain, sacral nerve compression or damage, radical pelvic surgery, pelvic fracture, rupturing of the urethra, neurotropic viruses, multiple sclerosis, transverse mellitus, diabetic cystopathy, and damage to the dorsal column of the spinal cord causing loss of bladder sensation. So these are the few causes which are common for both males and females. So what is the initial management of a patient with acute urinary retention? Initial management usually involves urethral catheterization on suprapubic catheter. Late management is treating the underlying cause. Here you can appreciate that there is a patient with this full bladder, and you can see that with the help of a trocar and cannula, this is the sharp end of the trocar and cannula, we insert Foley's catheter inside the bladder in the suprapubic space. This is called suprapubic catheter or suprapubic cystostomy. So this is how we can treat the patient with acute urinary retention if the urethral catheterization is not possible, as in the case of stricture urethra. If the patient is suffering from stricture urethra, then per urethral catheterization will not be possible, and patient will have to be to be inserted with suprapubic catheter. Chronic urinary retention is develops slowly. The bladder is distended, stretched very gradually over weeks or months, so pain is not a feature. In case of chronic urinary retention, patient is usually uh, not feeling any pain, it's comfortable, but the bladder is distended. Because this distension accounts for prolonged obstruction, and the bladder is usually acclimatized to that chronic retention, and it is distended, but it is not causing pain. So pain is not a feature in case of chronic retention. So if a patient comes to you with retention of urine and is not having any suprapubic pain or is not in acne, so that patient is having chronic urinary retention. Presentation: how the patient presents usually with the overflow incontinence, urinary dribbling, palpable lower suprapubic mass. That is due to the distended bladder. So patient is having overflow incontinence and urinary dribbling in case of chronic urinary retention. Chronic urinary retention is usually associated with reduced renal functions and upper tract dilatation, because the bladder is filled to the maximum capacity, and due to the pressure inside inside the bladder, the upper tract is not draining fully, and leading to the dilatation of the kidneys and dilatation of the ureter, leading to bilateral hydronephrosis and bilateral hydroureter. This is called upper tract dilatation. And due to this dilatation, the hydronephrosis and hydroureter, it leads to the impairment of the renal function. That is, the urea and creatinine of the patient is disturbed. Treatment is directed to the renal support and bladder drainage under slow rate to avoid sudden decompression, which causes hematuria. Whenever a patient with chronic retention, you try to pass uh, catheter, always try to decompress the catheter very slowly, because if you will not decompress the bladder slowly, it will cause hematuria. So whenever in a patient with chronic retention, you have to pass a Foley's catheter, always try to decompress the bladder slowly by intermittent clamping of the Foley's catheter, so that you may avoid hematuria. So after that, once you have catheterized the patient and the emergency is over, then you will have to go for the cause. You will have to treat the cause of the chronic retention. So now let's jump on to another non-traumatic emergency, urological emergency, and that is the acute scrotum. What is acute scrotum? Emergency situation requiring prompt evaluation, differential diagnosis, and potential immediate surgical exploration of the scrotum is called acute scrotum. So this is the differential diagnosis of acute or oblique subacute scrotum: torsion of the spermatic cord, torsion of the appendix testis, torsion of the appendix epididymis, epididymitis, epidydymorchitis, inguinal hernias, communicating hydrocele of the cord, traumatic or insect bite, dermatological reasons, and inflammatory vasculitis, idiopathic scrotal edema, tumors, spermatocele, varicocele, and non-urogenital pathologies. So these are the differential causes of acute oblique subacute scrotum. And let's now discuss briefly that among these, which conditions are urological emergency. So acute scrotum in case of emergency can be either torsion of the spermatic cord, which is intravaginal. This is the most serious urological emergency and need appropriate and immediate diagnosis and treatment. Otherwise, patient may lose one testis. Then is the torsion of the testicular and epididymal appendages, and third is epidydymorchitis, which is most common. So torsion of the spermatic cord, here you can appreciate that and this is the torsion. This is an extravaginal. This is the tunica vaginalis, which is overlying tunica vaginalis, which is overlying the testis. If the torsion of the spermatic cord occurs outside the tunica vaginalis, then it is called extravaginal testicular torsion. Here you can appreciate that the spermatic cord is tossed. It is twisted. And this is called intravaginal testicular torsion. Here you can appreciate that this is the tunica vaginalis, this is the testis, this is epididymis, and this is the spermatic cord. Here the spermatic cord is twisted inside the tunica vaginalis. So this is called intravaginal. These are the mainly two types of the testicular torsion: extravaginal torsion and intravaginal torsion. Torsion of the spermatic cord, particularly intravaginal torsion, is the true surgical emergency of the highest order. Irreversible ischemic injury to the testicular parenchyma may begin as soon as 4 hours. So testicular salvage as duration of testicular salvage decreases as duration of torsion increases. So whenever you have got a suspicion that any patient is suffering from testicular torsion, immediate diagnosis and treatment is required. If you will not do so, ultimately the testes will undergo ischemic necrosis, and due to ischemic necrosis, um, the testes will have ischemia, and whole of the testicular tissue will be necrosed, and ultimately you will have to go for orchiectomy. Torsion of the spermatic cord, how does it presents? It presents with an acute onset of scrotal pain, majority with history of prior episodes of severe self-limiting scrotal pain and swelling. Refer to the ipsilateral lower quadrant of the abdomen, and dysuria and other bladder symptoms are usually absent. So, majority of the patients present with prior episodes of severe self-limited scrotal pain and swelling, and the pain is usually radiated to the ipsilateral lower quadrant of the abdomen. So here you can appreciate that this is a suspected case of testicular torsion. The affected testis is lying high riding and is in transverse orientation. Usually testis in the longitudinal orientation, upside down or vertical orientation, but in case of testicular torsion, it is usually lying in the transverse orientation. Acute hydrocele or massive scrotal edema may be evident, and the most important is that cremasteric reflex is absent. That is when you uh, cremasteric reflex is absent. That is when you stroke the medial aspect of the thigh, the testis does not ascend in the scrotum. This is called absent cremasteric reflex. Usually the testis is tender and larger than the other side. Prahan's sign is positive. That is, upon lifting the testes up, the patient is not relieved of pain. This is called positive Prahan signs. So affected testes again I enumerate the physical examination findings in case of the patient with the testicular torsion. The affected testis is high riding, is having a transverse lie in the scrotum. Acute hydrocele or massive scrotal edema is evident. Cremasteric reflex is absent. Tender, larger than the other side. Prahan signs is positive, and manual detorsion of the testis can be attempted. So there are other some of the other tests which can aid, which can help you in the diagnosis, to aid in differential diagnosis of the acute scrotum, to confirm the absence of the torsion of the cord. Doppler examination of the cord and testes is, it has got high false positive and false negative results. So Doppler examination is the only aid available immediately that can help you out whether the patient is having testicular torsion or not. So you will have to perform the Doppler examination of the cord and testes. If you perform the Doppler and color Doppler ultrasound assessment of the anatomy and determining the presence or absence of the blood flow, it has got, color Doppler has got high sensitivity 88.9% and high specificity 98.8%, but it is usually operator dependent. So the patient with the color Doppler ultrasound, you have got a very high sensitivity and specificity for the for detection of the testicular torsion. Next comes the radionuclide imaging assessment of the testicular blood flow, PPV of 75%, sensitivity of 90%, and specificity of 89%. False impression from hyperemia of the scrotal wall. It's really non-helpful in hydrocele and hematomas, and it is not readily available. That investigation that is readily available and that has got very high sensitivity and specificity for detection of the testicular torsion is color Doppler. So color Doppler is readily available, and you can easily advise and you can easily interpret So this is the comparison of color Doppler and radionuclide imaging. Here you can see in the left testes, you can appreciate that there are blood vessels. These red ones are arteries and the blue ones are small veins. You can appreciate that the left testis is having a good blood supply, whereas in this left in this is the right testis, this is the left testis. Here you can appreciate that in the left testis you cannot appreciate any such bluish markings or reddish markings, which show that the left testis is not having any blood supply. So this is the color Doppler, which immediately gives you an idea that this testis is having ischemia and is not receiving the proper blood supply. This is the radionuclide imaging. Here you can appreciate that this black shows vascularity, and whereas this white does not show any vascularity. So one of the testes is having ischemia. So what is the immediate treatment? Even if you are not having color Doppler available and you have got strong suspicion that this patient is suffering from the testicular torsion, you will have immediately go for exploration, because this is an acute emergency. If you will wait and there is permanent damage, permanent ischemic necrosis of the testes, and ultimately you will have to go in again to go for the orchiectomy. So it is better that you explore the testes immediately after strong suspicion. So a median Raphe scrotal incision or a transverse incision is made. The affected side should be examined first. The cord should be detossed. Testes with marginal viability should be placed in warm sponge and re-examined after several minutes. And necrotic testes should be removed. If the testis is to be preserved, it should be placed into the dartus pouch with suture fixation so that it may not uh, it may not have torsion again. And the contralateral testes must be fixed to prevent subsequent torsion. So this is the summary of the surgical exploration is that if you have got a strong suspicion and you think that this patient is suffering from testicular torsion, you will have to immediately explore by either transverse or Raphe-Incision, median Raphe-Incision. You will have to explore the testes and you will have to see whether this testis is fixed or not, whether this testis is viable or not. If the testis is clearly viable, then it's okay. But if the testis is not clearly viable, then you will have to uh, use warm sponges, and you will have to place the testes, marginally viable testes, into warm sponges, and then look for its color change, whether it changes its color from dark red to pink red or bright red. If it doesn't changes its color, it means it's not viable and it has undergone the permanent ischemic necrosis, and you will have to go for orchiectomy then. And the other important thing is that you will have to fix this testis so that it may not in future it may not go into torsion again. And the third most important take home message from this surgery is that you will have to approach the contralateral testis, which is the normal testis, and you will have to fix it again so that it may not fix it again so that it may not undergo torsion. So torsion of the spermatic cord, you will have to take history, you will have to go for detailed physical examination and urine analysis. If the history is of short duration of symptoms and negative urine analysis, there is high probability of torsion. You will have to go for surgical exploration. If there is long duration of symptoms and positive urine analysis, low probability of torsion, color Doppler ultrasonography, you will have to advise. And if you find a decrease or absent blood flow or equivocal results, then you will have to go for surgical exploration. Whereas is in case of increased or normal blood flow, you will have to go for non-operative management, and you will have to treat that patient on the management lines of epididymoarchitis. So these two things go side by side, and at a junior level, you can get easily get confused with the thing whether this patient is suffering from testicular torsion or he's suffering from the epididymoarchitis. So surgical exploration, short duration of history, short duration of symptoms, negative urine analysis, there is high chances or high probability of torsion, so you will have to go for surgical exploration. In case of long duration of symptoms and positive urine analysis for infection, there is low probability of torsion, so you will have to go for color Doppler ultrasonography, and decreased or absent blood flow or equivocal results, you will have to go for surgical exploration. Is if the blood flow is normal or it is increased, then you will have to treat that patient on the lines of epididymoarchitis. You will have to go for conservative management. Epididymoarchitis, next is non-traumatic emergency is epididymoarchitis. Presentation, usually patient presents with indolent process, scrotal swelling, erythema and pain. Dysuria and fever is more common. Localized epididymal tenderness, a swollen and tender epididymis, or a massively swollen hemiscrotum with absence of landmarks. Perimesteric reflex should be present. And pyuria, bacteriuria, or a positive urine culture, gram-negative bacteria. So in case of epididymoarchitis, the patient usually present with indolent process, scrotal swelling, erythema and pain. Dysuria and fever is more common in case of epididymoarchitis than in case of testicular torsion. So localized epididymal tenderness, a swollen and tender epididymis, or a massively swollen hemiscrotum with absence of landmarks. Perimesteric reflex should be present, and pyuria, bacteriuria, or a positive urine culture should be there. So epididymoarchitis is usually self-resolving disease in some cases if the patient is not diabetic or does not have any immunocompromised status. So usually we advise bed rest for 1 to 3 days, then relative restriction to mobility, scrotal elevation, the use of an athletic spotter. Parenteral antibiotic therapy should be instituted when UTI is documented or suspected, and urethral instrumentation should be avoided because you can then convert the local inflammation to systemic inflammatory response syndrome, and patient may go into shock. So urethral instrumentation, any sort of urethral instrumentation in case if the patient is suffering from epididymoarchitis should be avoided. Next come the traumatic injuries. Traumatic injuries most common are renal injuries. The kidneys are relatively well protected from the traumatic injuries. Considerable degree of force is usually required to injure a kidney because it is very well protected in on the rib cage and by the paravertebral muscles and abdominal viscera. So it is lying deep inside the retroperitoneum. So kidneys are a retroperitoneal structure. So they are very well protected from the blunt and sharp injuries. There are two methods of renal injury. One is blunt and the other is penetrating. Blunt is a direct blow or acceleration or deceleration road, like in road traffic accidents, falls from height or fall onto flank. So these are the modes of blunt injuries: direct blow or acceleration or deceleration, road traffic accidents, falls from height. Penetrating injuries are usually with the help of knives, gunshots, iatrogenic example, percutaneous nephrolithotomies, which is iatrogenic injury. So knives and gunshots usually account for very less renal injuries. Usually the iatrogenic injuries are present in case of kidneys. Indications for renal imaging. So if a patient with renal injury, suspected renal injury comes to you, then what are the parameters which should be considered before ordering investigation? So there are certain indications for renal imaging like macroscopic hematuria, penetrating chest, flank, and abdominal wounds, microscopic more than 5 red blood cells per high power field or dipstick hematuria, a hypotensive patient, with systolic blood pressure of less than 90. So macroscopic or visible hematuria, penetrating chest, flank, and abdominal wounds, or microscopic hematuria, hypotensive patient, a history of a rapid acceleration or deceleration injuries, any child with microscopic or dipstick hematuria who has sustained trauma. So what are the imaging modalities that can be used to highlight the renal injuries? One of them, the old method, was IVU, which is usually replaced by the contrast enhanced CT. On table IVU, a patient is transferred immediately to the operating theater without having had a CT scan, and a retroperitoneal hematoma is found. So if a patient is has been transferred to the OT table, operation theater table, so then you can go for immediate IVU, single shot IVUs to look for the renal injuries if the CT scan is not possible or is not available at that center. Spiral CT does not allow accurate staging. Renal ultrasound can be done, and it has got certain advantages and disadvantages in case of renal injuries. Like, it can certainly establish the presence of two kidneys and the presence of a retroperitoneal hematoma. Power Doppler can immediately identify the presence of blood flow in the renal vessels. Disadvantage is that it cannot accurately identify the parenchymal tears, collecting system injuries, or extravasation of urine until a later stage when a urine collection has had time to accommodate. Contrast enhanced CT, the imaging study of the choice, and it is accurate, rapid images other than for other intra-abdominal structures as well. So contrast enhanced CT is an investigation of choice for diagnosis and the management strategies and the assessment of the management strategies for the renal injuries. So there is a grading or staging system for renal injuries, which is devised by American Association for the Surgery of Trauma, Organ Injury Severity Scale. So renal injuries can be divided into 5 grades: grade 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. In grade 4, grade 1, there is only a subcapsular hematoma, as you can appreciate in grade 1 injury. Here you can appreciate that there is only a subcapsular hematoma. And in grade 2, there is enhanced or enlarged subcapsular hematoma with a parenchymal tear. Here you can appreciate a parenchymal tear. And next, you can see that there is enlarged subcapsular hematoma with the parenchymal tear that is going into the renal calyces, fornix, and it is not usually going into the collecting system. So grade 3. Grade 4 is a subcapsular hematoma with a laceration that is penetrating the renal collecting system. Here you can appreciate that this laceration is going into the renal collecting system. Grade 5 is either the renal pedicle injury, artery and veins are transected, or there are multiple grade 4 injuries. This is called grade 5. So only subcapsular hematoma, only parenchymal tear less than 3 centimeter, parenchymal tear more than 3 centimeter, parenchymal tear involving the renal collecting system, and renal injuries with multiple grade 4 injuries or transaction of the renal pedicle. Management. Renal injuries usually either blunt or penetrating. More than 95% of blunt injuries are managed conservatively, whereas 50% of renal stab injuries and 25% of renal gunshot wounds are managed conservatively. So blunt injuries, in case of blunt injuries, in 95 injuries can be managed conservatively. It means you don't have to go for any surgical exploration. You just reassess, rehydrate the patient, and 95% of the blunt injuries are managed conservatively, whereas 50% of the renal stab injuries and 25% of the renal gunshot wounds can be managed conservatively. Conservative management include wide bore IV line, IV antibiotics, bed rest, serial CBC, hematocrit to see for any bleeding, or follow up ultrasound or CT in 2 to 3 weeks. You will have to assess the patient and keep him under observation for 2 to 3 weeks. Renal injuries, if you need to have surgical exploration, then there are certain indications in which you will have to go for renal exploration, like surgical exploration in case of persistent bleeding. If there is persistent tachycardia and or hypotension, failing to respond failing to respond to the appropriate fluid and blood replacement, it means the patient is persistently or continuously losing blood. So you will have to explore and the kidneys, and if there is expanding perirenal hematoma, again the patient will show signs of continued bleeding and pulsatile perirenal hematoma. So these are the three indications in case of you will have to go for the renal exploration. One is persistent bleeding, persistent tachycardia and or hypotension, failing to respond to appropriate fluid and blood replacement, expanding perirenal hematoma. Again, the patient will show signs of continued bleed and pulsatile perirenal hematoma. So this is an algorithm or a flow chart for trauma of the kidneys. You can appreciate that the renal trauma can be divided broadly into two categories, blunt and penetrating. And then first we will look for the penetrating injuries. In case of penetrating injuries, if there is microscopic hematuria but the patient is stable, abdominal CT scan or IV optional. And if there is grade 3 to 5 injuries, then selective renal exploration should be done in case of grade 3 to 5 injuries in case of penetrating. But if the patient is having blunt trauma, then hematuria, microscopic hematuria, no shock, selective renal imaging is performed and clinical follow-up is set up. No need of any surgical exploration. Hematuria is gross or microscopic, associated with shock, systolic blood pressure of less than 90. Patient is unstable and there is abdominal exploration. Single shot IVP on the table can be performed. Abnormal or inconclusive, then you will have to go for renal exploration. If IVP is inconclusive or abnormal, then you will have to go for renal exploration. So this is a flow chart of trauma, blunt and penetrating, and the patient is having hematuria, which is microscopic, or a hematuria which is gross or microscopic. And if you think that the patient is unstable and is unresponsive to your hydration therapy, its systolic blood pressure is still less than 90, then you will have to go for the exploration. So next come the ureteric injuries. Ureteric injuries are very uncommon because ureter is very narrow tube and it is lying and very well protected in the retroperitoneum. The ureters are protected from external trauma by surrounding bony structures, muscles, and other organs. Causes and mechanism are usually external trauma or internal or iatrogenic injuries. External trauma is usually very rare in case of ureteric injuries. Usually very large force is required, blunt or penetrating, to cause the ureteric trauma. Blunt external trauma, severe enough to injure the ureters, will usually be associated with multiple other organ injuries. Knife or bullet wounds to the abdomen or chest may damage the ureter as well as other organs. So, ureteric injuries are not that common as common are the renal injuries or bladder injuries. Ureteric injuries are very less common because they are very well protected in the retroperitoneum, guarded by the other organs and guarded by the bones and muscles. So knife or bullet wound to the abdomen or chest may damage the ureter as well as the other organs. Iatrogenic injuries are uncommon, but it is more common than external trauma. Surgery, usually hysterectomy, oophorectomy, and sigmoidocolectomy. Ureteroscopy, cesarean section, aortoiliac vascular graft placement, laparoscopic procedures, or certain orthopedic injuries the may lead to the ureteric injuries. So internal trauma or iatrogenic injury is usually due to the surgery like hysterectomy, oophorectomy, and sigmoidocolectomy, ureteroscopy, cesarean section, aortoiliac vascular graft placement, or laparoscopic procedures, orthopedic operations. In case of ureteric injuries, diagnosis requires a high index of suspicion, intraoperative late and ileus, the presence of urine within the peritoneal cavity, and prolonged post-operative fever or overt urinary sepsis, persistent drainage of fluid from abdominal or pelvic drains, from the abdominal wound or from the vagina. Number 4 are the flank pain if the ureter has been ligated, and abdominal mass representing a urinoma, vague abdominal pain, and the pathology reports on the organ that has been removed may note the presence of segment of ureter inside. So diagnosis requires a high index of suspicion that there is ureteric injury. Intraoperative identification, that is if the patient has been intraoperatively or paraoperatively been identified that the ureteric injury has been done. In case of late, how can you identify that the patient has got a ureteric injury? Number 1, an ileus, the presence of urine within the peritoneal cavity, or prolonged postoperative fever or overt urinary sepsis, persistent drainage of the fluid from the abdominal or pelvic drains, from the abdominal wound or from the vagina, flank pain if the ureter has been ligated, and abdominal mass representing a urinoma or vague abdominal pain. The pathology report of removed organ shows this segment of the ureter. Treatment options are JJ stenting, primary closure of the partial transection of the ureter, direct ureter to ureter anastomosis in case of sharp transection, or reimplantation of the ureter into the bladder, ureteroneocystostomy, either using a Schwarz hitch or a Boris flap. So ureterostomy can be done. Auto transplantation of the kidney into the pelvis if the large fragment of the ureter has been destroyed, and replacement of the ureter with the ileum. Permanent cutaneous ureterostomy can be made, or even you will have to go for nephrectomy. So these are the certain treatment options which can be adopted depending upon the site of the ureteric injury and depending upon the segment of the ureter that has been lost due to the injury. So different treatment options can be applied. Again, I repeat, that is JJ stenting, double J stenting, primary closure of the partial transection of the ureter with single stitch if the transection is very small and it is not involving whole of the lumen, then you just have to go and apply the stitches on the transected portion. Direct ureter to ureter anastomosis, if there is sharp transection and there is not much segment loss of the ureter, then you can go for direct ureter to ureter anastomosis. Reimplantation of the ureter into the bladder is with the ureteroneocystostomy, either using a Schwarz hitch or a Boris flap. Transureteroureterostomy, that is one ureter is implanted into the other ureter. Auto transplantation of the kidney into the pelvis, if there is a major segment loss, then you will have to transplant the kidney into the renal pelvis, auto transplant. Replacement of the ureter with ileum, and permanent cutaneous ureterostomy can be made, that is ureter can be brought into the skin and we can apply the bag on that ureter, or nephrectomy. These are the different options. Here you can see the chart of the or diagram of the ureteric upper ureter. ureteric injuries. Here you can see that the ureter is divided into three portions. One is upper ureter, middle ureter, and lower ureter. The upper ureter starts from the pelvic-ureteric junction to the start of the sacroiliac joint, and the middle ureter is present against the sacroiliac joint, and the third part of the ureter is from the end of the sacroiliac joint to its insertion in the bladder. So if there is the upper ureteric injury, it can be done with either ureterostomy or transureteroureterostomy. And if there is middle ureteric injury, ureterostomy with transureteroureterostomy or Boris flap. In case of lower ureter, you can go for reimplantation into the Swasich or Boris flap. So these are the different treatment or surgical options available for different segments of ureter which are injured: upper ureter, middle ureter, and lower ureter. So here we have today, we have completed the urinary retention, acute scrotum, renal injuries, and ureteric injuries. In the next lecture, we will go for the bladder injuries, urethral injuries, and testicular injuries, and whether the patient question answer. So hopefully you will have understood today's lecture, which was mainly about urinary retention, acute scrotum, priapism, and renal injuries and ureter injuries. Now we have got almost 5 to 7 minutes left, and I will now encourage that if you want to ask any question, you are most welcome. And about regarding today's lecture, if you have got any queries, any question, you can go for that. Thank you. Question answer.